Hi and welcome to this tutorial. In our previous tutorial, we wrote a collection of objects in our entity class and we persisted it in a separate table. We're going to look at some ways we can tweak the collection object here. We can tweak the way Hibernate saves this collection, and we'll also explore some advanced options. So the first thing is the name of the table. Hibernate has given this name for us. It's the class name, user details, underscore the the member variable name, list of addresses. So I want to tweak this. This is not a very user-friendly name. I want to have the name as user underscore address. So all I do is add an annotation here. Add join table. Let me import this. And what I'm mentioning here is the configuration for this join table. Join table is this one, the user details underscore list of addresses. So I'm just using the join table annotation to configure it. The join table is not mandatory, as we've already seen. Without this join table configuration, there are defaults that Hibernate goes for, including the name and a few other things, and which is fine. But if you want to configure it, you would use this annotation. So then, the configuration that I want to do here is name equals user address. That's it. So on top of the collection declaration and the definition, I just use the join table annotation. Now save and run. You can see the table name has changed. It's now user underscore address. Okay, now how about this primary key? Even this doesn't look very good. It's a user details underscore user ID, which is the key. Again, how it's got this key name is by using this class name, user details underscore the primary key name of this class, which is user ID. So this is again the default, and we can override this. So what I do is, inside this join table annotation, I will add a comma here, and I will add join columns equals at join column, and now I can give a name here, and I will let the name be user ID itself. Okay, I will have to import. Let me remove this so that it gives me the auto suggestion. Then like this, just a little shortcut there. Okay, so what I'm doing here is the join table has a property called join columns, and the join columns takes a join column annotation. Now I can define a new join column annotation with this name, so that the join column that's used inside this join table will be this join column here. So I'll clear this out, save, and again run this. There you go. The reference ID. This is again the foreign key. It was earlier the class name underscore user ID. Now it's just user underscore ID. So this has, this is the join column that it's taken. Okay, the next tweak that we can do, let's have a look at this table here. Okay, this is no longer with this name, it's user underscore address. Okay, now I have this table here. We have a foreign key, which is user ID, but this table does not have a primary key. There's no index column here. Now what if you want to define an index, an ID for this table? You want to define an ID for a collection which is inside your entity class. So in order to have an index column, I need to have a data type that supports index. I cannot use a hash set because there's no index supported in the hash set. So the first thing I'll do is I'll change this from a set to a collection. I'll probably implement an array list. Array list is a good option because you have indexes in arrays. So arrays are all possible options. So I'll just go with an array list. This time I'll again declare with the interface. I am not going to declare the array list here. My list of addresses will not be an array list. It will be declared as the interface collection. Now let me import this now from java.util. The reason why we write the interface here and not the implementation will be clear in our next tutorial, where we're going to talk about eager and lazy loading of objects. This is a very important concept, and we're going to cover that in the next tutorial. But for now, note that this is always going to be an interface, and when you say new, that's when you have an implementation. So I'll say array list. So I have defined this as an array list. Now I'll update the getters and setters. Okay, so now I have an array list having the list of addresses. This will not change. It will still be get list of addresses dot add, because we are putting the object using the interface method. That will still be a dot add, and it will take object as a parameter. So instead of adding to a set, now it's adding to a collection, which is an array list in this case. Now what I need to do here is I need to define the primary key configuration here. So the way I do that is by using this annotation called @collection ID. Now this @collection ID is unique in that it is not a JPA annotation. So far, whenever we've been doing imports for the annotations, we have been importing from java.x.persistence. You see here all the annotations that we have imported in the past. They're all from java.x.persistence. What this means is that whatever annotations that we have written so far are all compliant with the JPA standard. The JPA standard is the standard that has been specified for persistence implementations by a standard body. And now what we are doing is we are not using the JPA annotation, we are using something specific to Hibernate. Now Hibernate implements the JPA standard. So even though we're using the JPA annotations, the implementer of all these is Hibernate, because we've added the Hibernate library. So when we say do a add table, Hibernate reads this add table and says, hey, I need to create this table. So even though the specification is JPA, the implementer is Hibernate. But in this case, this feature is not provided by JPA. This feature is additional feature provided by Hibernate alone. So if you're changing your implementer from Hibernate to something else, all these others would work provided they implement JPA, but this would not work because this is specific to Hibernate. But which is fine. You can use features that are specifically provided by Hibernate, but it's always better to use a JPA standard because that will leave us with less things to change when we move from one a JPA provider to another JPA provider. It's already imported it here. It says org.hibernate.annotations.collection ID. Now what this means is that the collection ID annotation is not from java.x.persistence. The collection ID annotation is from org.hibernate.annotation. So it's an annotation specific to Hibernate alone. Okay, now here I'll do this. Add missing attributes. Now these are the attributes that the collection ID expects. So first of all, the columns. What is the column that you want to define as the primary key? Next thing is the generator. How is the primary key to be generated? And the third thing is the type. What is the type of the primary key? Now let me start with the first one. So I'll use the @column annotation to define name equals, I'll call this address ID. So what I'm doing is I'm giving a name for this ID, which is going to list all the collection of addresses. So I'll call this the address ID. So for generator, I will define a new generator here. I'll call this the @generic generator. Now I'll import this. Again, you notice this is from org.hibernate.annotation. So we're going deep into Hibernate territory here. We're away from the standard JPA annotations. Now the generator, let me call this a name. I'll call this Hilo Gen, and let's say strategy equals Hilo. So Hilo is common generator type which Hibernate supplies. So I'm going to use that, and here in my collection ID annotation I'll provide this generator name. So I'll call this Hilo Gen. Okay, so now this leaves us with the last one, which is the type. So it has type equals @type. @type is again an annotation in order to define the type of the the primary key column that we are entering here. So I will have this type as type equals. I'll make this a long. So it so the primary key column is going to be long. Okay, in summary, in order to have a collection of objects as a member variable inside your entity class, the first thing you need to do is to change the data type of the collection to something that supports IDs, with something that supports indexes, and an array list supports indexes. I'm going to use an array list now. So again, I change this one to an interface which is of array list, and an interface which array list is implementing, which is collection. So I write that here. Now I have a list which supports indexes. The next thing I do is I define this @collection ID annotation. Now the @collection ID annotation tells that this collection should have an identifier. Now the @collection ID has properties which define what the identifier should be. First of all, I define the column, which is address_ID. The identifier should have a column name, of course, so that column is listed here. The next thing is the type. What is the type of the identifier? I want this to be a long. And the third thing is, what is the generator? See, this ID is not present here. Address does not have an ID, so I cannot really set the ID. It has to be auto-generated. Now, in order to auto-generate it, what I do is I define a generator, which is a high-low. High-low is one type of generator that Hibernate provides. So I define a generator which is a high-low. And then once I've defined the generator, I can use this in many places. Here I'm going to use it for the generator tag. And I'm saying generator is high-low, which says use this generator in order to generate the primary key for this address ID, which is an index for this list of addresses. And again, as we discussed, all these are Hibernate annotations, which means that they are org.hibernate.annotations import. They are not JPA standard. So if you change your provider from Hibernate to something else, then you will have to modify this. But we need to learn this as well, because these are the features that Hibernate provides, and there's no point in not using some of these if they're helpful, even though they're not JPA standard. So let me save this, and I'll run this again. Okay, now let's see how it's created. So here you can see address ID has been created and the values 1 and 2 have been entered. So this has been auto-generated. So now I have a primary key for my address table, and depending on how many other values I insert, the user ID is going to be a foreign key. Depending on the user that the address is assigned to, this value will be different, and multiple rows could have the same user ID, but this will always be a unique column. It will have unique values, and this will be the primary key for this table.